Okay, I'm going to call this meeting of the Board of Directors to order. Once again, I'd like to welcome you to your Tvpoa board meeting. And we continue to operate under COVID-19 protocols to protect our meeting participants. And today, one of our members is attending remotely. To assure transparency and to allow community participation, this meeting is being live streamed. It is also being recorded and will be available on the POA website. As an aside, by now I'm sure that most of you have heard that Governor Lee has issued a new executive order, number 63. And I'll speak to that a bit later when we get into the COVID-19 operations update. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. May I have a motion to approve the September 16th, 2020 Tvpoa board minutes as presented?
Motion made. Second.
Motion and a second. Any changes or comments? All in favor? 6-0, one abstention. I was not at the last meeting. Okay. So with that, we'll move on to the COVID-19 operations report. And as I said in my opening comments, there are a lot of new rules. We're still trying to sort some of them out. Effective September 30th, Governor Lee issued a new executive order, as I said, number 63. Seems like yesterday it was only number 1. In his press conference earlier in the week, he said that he was going to relax many of the COVID restrictions that were set to expire. The order itself does not address any particular changes, instead saying, quote, all venues, employers, businesses, and organizations are strongly encouraged and expected to operate in accordance with and to fulfill the spirit of applicable guidance issued by the Governor's Economic Recovery Group, also known as the Tennessee Pledge. The order does include the following: social distancing of 6 feet from persons outside the same household remains the rule. Persons are urged to wear face coverings in public places. Special care is to be taken to protect vulnerable populations. And persons with COVID or symptoms of COVID must stay home. None of these rules are new. And the new order is in effect until October 30th. On October 2nd, the Economic Recovery Group issued a complete revision of the Tennessee Pledge, which applies to all businesses, organizations, and activities. This is the first revision of ERG guidance since early June. The new guidance is divided into 2 parts: general guidelines and guidelines specific to business type. The general guidelines include strongly encouraging the wearing of masks in public. Businesses are left to decide if masks are mandatory. New screening protocols for employees and patrons of businesses. So the questions you might get asked will be a little bit different than they were previously. Rules on isolating and quarantining. And oh, by the way, there's definitions of what isolation and quarantining are. Social distancing mandates, sanitization and disinfecting practices, and mandates for the protection of vulnerable populations. The business-specific guidelines are keyed to type of business, physical characteristics of the venue, type of activity, and location of the activity. And location often refers to inside or outside. Our operations fall under 8 different sets of these guidelines. It used to be 9, so we're doing better than we were. Each of our operations has been briefed about the new requirements and asked to examine their current COVID protocols. They are then to come forward to the board with their suggested operational revisions. I'm expecting them to complete this review in the next few days, at which point any changes will be communicated to the village. So with that, Winston, do you have anything to add about operations?
Very little. Admin, there'd be no change. Marketing, communications, PR, better known as the Welcome Center, no changes in that operation. Golf, Chris Sykes felt there was no need to change anything in that operation so far. AWE is going to discuss with you some ideas regarding operations. Andy wants to talk to you first. Jeff did not see any change in the current change in the public works operations. So in those operations, the protocols and procedures in place are going to continue on. In recreation, Simon did recognize that the new order coming down this weekend, basketball courts, racquetball courts, and playgrounds could now be used.
So the playgrounds are open. We can just go out there and swing to our heart's content. Okay, anything else, Winston?
That's it.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is long-range planning activity or advisory committee's mission proposal. As you might recall, in 2019, the board previously approved a new vision statement. And it took as an objective for 2020 a revision of the mission, values, and guiding principles statements as a board objective. We then rapidly assigned that to the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee. So they brought forward proposals in the last month, and with input from the board and from the committee, the board and the committee have reached final consensus on the following, values and guiding principles and we're going to present them today for final approval. As a reminder, the vision statement that was adopted in 2019 is to be a dynamic, engaging community meeting the changing needs of property owners in a fiscally responsible manner, resulting in a lifetime of well-being. You want to flip the slide? And one more. And these are the statements that have been, brought forward from the final review with the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee. The mission to enhance and preserve the Teleco Village quality of life, social fabric, property values, and overall member value through effective and efficient management of the association. The values fall into 5 categories: people, service, communication, fiscal responsibility, and aesthetics and environment. And the guiding principles are practice timely communication while listening and acknowledging our diverse needs and interests. Encourage participation, volunteerism, and teamwork in all aspects of life, both within and outside of our community. Utilize impartial, fact-based, need-based, data-driven decision processes. Strive for continuous improvement, and make aesthetic and environmental impact a key part of relevant decisions affecting Teleco Village and its property owners. So at this point, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the mission, values, and guiding principles statements as proposed by the Long Range Planning Advisory Committee. Pat makes the motion.
I'll second it. Oh, sorry.
Carla seconds. Discussion.
Well, if nothing else, thanks to the Long Range Planning Committee and what they've done here. This is not just something that they did last week. This went on for
Months.
actually
Years.
2.5 years.
Yes.
And this is a result of all of those residents that participated in the focus groups, the opinion survey, the follow-up groups, and their feedback and follow-up that generated this. And thank you all very much for everybody that was a part of this.
Yeah, this task came out of the long-range strategic plan that the board adopted 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. So, yes, a lot of work.
A lot of work.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Are there any comments from outside? Okay, with that, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? Passes 7-0. And Sue, for a while we had a lot of interest in Tugaloo, and probably not as much now that the weather is starting to turn, but and if you'll recall, what the board did is we said, look, we really need to study this with a team. And so a team was established, and Sue took the lead on that team, and she's going to present the team's recommendations. But before she does that, I really want to commend the 5 people from the village that were participants in this team. I can't tell you how hard these people worked. So with that, Sue, floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, and thanks for that introduction. And again, I certainly add to what Rick said. Yeah, essentially our community members, David Andrews, Thomas Flood, Paige Lash, Rick Marinaro, why do I do? Manarino and Kurt Zaluga. And I mean, this isn't just a group that got together a couple of times and sat around a meeting and kicked around some ideas. Every single one of these peoples was given an assignment to go out and research and find out what reality was on the issues that the community raised, brought back all of those facts and data to which the team then worked on these things. And then thank you certainly to Simon, as well as Mitzi, as our representatives from the staff to help us with history and process and all of those things that we needed to make sure we were working within those constructs. And then Rick and myself were the representative board members on the team as well. So it was a good, well-rounded team, but again, another example of how the community has stepped up. So the issues that were identified, and these were identified through the feedback that the community gave us from what we asked for through the telegram or other POA communication vehicles, and these were the ones that were reoccurring time and time again. So these are the ones that we researched and will speak to here. So first of all, a notion of security and safety. And so we said, okay, well, what are we doing about that? So a few of us, Thomas and David and I, met with Jeff. He gave us an entire education on what our let's call it surveillance or monitoring of Tugaloo was. We're in pretty darn good shape down there. 17 cameras that cover 90% of the area. You'll see then one of the things that we suggested is let's see if we can cover a little more than 90, and really I think we believe that what that's going to take is just readjustment of some cameras to make sure that we have coverage, because literally we walked around every step, as Pat has done, of Tugaloo to see, okay, well, what can we see, what can't we see, and what do we need to do to make sure that we can see those things. So the suggestion was we need to see what we can do about re-aiming so we can cover the kayak area, and maybe part of the dog park. The other thing that was suggested too is, in case we do ever have issues down there, we're capturing or have the ability to capture license plates as people come into Tugaloo. So that may require us to get a different kind of camera, or a camera that can do a better job at zooming in on those kinds of things. So that's another thing that the team suggested. The other interesting thing that we found out, for those of you who have had events at Tugaloo, is there is one breaker box down there. And right there in the middle of it is gee, maybe I shouldn't be saying this publicly, but there is a breaker for the camera system. So we said we need to isolate that so that is a little bit more secured than being there when someone might inadvertently turn it off during a chili fest. So that's that needs to happen.
Auto theft.
Or during a theft.
Oh, man. Okay, so moving on. And then the other things that we talked about is, there are times, regardless where people won't be down there, and while we do have the cameras going, the one thing, and this kind of comes out of some of the things that I have learned from Neighborhood Watch, is motion lights are a wonderful thing. If all of a sudden someone is walking around somewhere and they all of a sudden have a light shined on them, a lot of times that will change behavior. So we recommended that as well. And to dovetail off of that is adding an under surveillance video sign that the people are aware, if they can't see those 17 cameras, that yeah, you know, we are watching what's going on. And then another thing is post-COVID to work with our friends on COPS to see if maybe they can go down there a little more frequently. Again, just a presence of someone being aware of what's going on, we believe really makes a difference. One of the things that we've found is just by having our rec people who had their rec polo shirts on going on and circling around the beach, people just really seem to go, oh, okay, there's somebody here, they're, you know, maintaining, they're watching, they're monitoring, and I think that was appreciated. So. Another point that was brought up was whether we needed to be doing something more from a life-saving device perspective. So, like, you know, and I'm told, obviously, you wouldn't do this in a lake environment, but, you know, like you have a hook at a pool, you have a lifesaver or whatever, and Simon investigated that, and what we are doing currently is in compliance with what we should be doing for a lake environment. So we're good there. And then the other thing that we talked a little bit about is making it clear to our community, what do you do if you think you perceive an issue at the Tugaloo area? So we know that we need to bolster up consistent communication on what that is, and just an overall communication plan for operation at Tugaloo. So that's security and safety. Moving on, smoking. Smoking is certainly something that irritates most people. Prior to the start of this project, beach goers had expressed concern about smoking on the beach, smoking in the water, so on and so forth. So a designated smoking area was created even before we started this committee. The one thing that we're going to try to do is to make the signage for where this area is a lot clearer than it is right now. But we do feel like we have seen that this is helping the situation down there. Next is park maintenance. Current state. Beach appeared to have a variety of trash, goose excrement. One of our, David found for us, well, not found, but addressed the fact that there's a ground bee infestation, took care of that. Bad behavior. Currently, we made note of the fact that there's only 2 trash receptacles in the pavilion. Just things like that might be some quick hits on taking care of that. And people felt like restrooms weren't clean. So let's look at the recommendations. So after all of these things started coming to roost, if you will, daily raking and cleaning of the beach started happening. That's already in process, and I think it's made a huge difference down there. And in terms of the geese, that's another interesting one, but it seems like we do have sound machines that we could employ to discourage the geese from landing. We've got the fake fox down there. We just need to move it once in a while to fool those little geese down there. So, but again, making strides here to improve the situation, and it has already improved. And again, our friend David Andrews has personally taken on the ground bee infestation by administering spectricide down there. And but this is something I'd like to see Public Works take over from our community member. So that's that. the bad behavior thing, and obviously there's a lot of ways you can attack this, but one of the things that we notice is we have a one rule sign down there, which number one is a bit antiquated and probably not placed in the right place. So just overall, our tact on this one, as well as other things that you'll see coming up here, is that we really need to work on our signage. I mean, we don't want to have 140 signs for each individual thing. So we really need to look at a good strategy for where do we place these things and what do they need to say to make sure that they are resonating with our community. You know, the two trash thing in the pavilion, that's a pretty easy one. Let's add some trash receptacles, and I think we have some other ones just hanging around that we can just put down there that should be a no-cost item. And we are monitoring to see restrooms we know they are cleaned daily, and we are monitoring that. Dogs on beach and grass. So sometimes our dog owners allow their dogs to run unleashed, which, number one, is already against the rules down there, if you read the rule sign, which, you know, again, we're working on that. And dog owners sometimes don't pick up after their dogs. So number one recommendation is to change the dog limitation to no dogs beyond parking lot. So in doing that, it's our attempt to keep them off the beach so that, you know, they can't even get to the pavilion. They should not even be at the pavilion, so that they stay off the beach. Investigate alternative Tugaloo locations for dogs to go into the water away from the beach. And Simon has some good ideas on that. So that's something else that we're going to investigate. And certainly include all of this in the new beach signage. And the other thing that we talked about too is not just for the dog thing, but overall creating a brochure so that when people come in, and we'll talk a little bit about how this would get into action, but create a brochure so that we can, kind of like when you go to the state park, you get handed a brochure on here's how we expect everyone to act when they're at the beach. Yes, Bruce?
I would include in that notification to the people in the village that there is a place over on Choji Way where they can take their dogs to swim, walk, whatever they want to that's away from the beach.
Okay. I'm not familiar with that, but Simon's shaking his head, so I think
It's over in Toquicos between, when you come down Old Von Orr Road. And,
Okay.
you know, and
Okay.
it kind of becomes Choji Way and goes up the big hill. To the right, there's
Gotcha.
an old road used to go down into the water. Anybody can use that to take their dogs to.
Okay, great. Thank you. So another alternative to look at. Okey doke. So moving on, pavilion access. Tugaloo Pavilion is currently accessible to all. If a group wishes exclusive access, they can rent it, but this must be done by a property owner. And then the other thing we noted, current documentation on allowable usage is vague, which could lead to use issues. So what the team is suggesting is verbiage revision on rental agreements right now, or retitle the application from guidelines. It's currently called a guideline rather than an agreement, so we'd like to see that strengthened. Change approximate number of guests to number of attendees and number of non-property owner guests, so we have an idea, we can understand who's there. And add verbiage that requires property owner to be present at the time of the reservation and during use. So we make sure that, you know, it is truly being used by community members. And then as we can do it, change verbiage in marketing material. Currently, there's some things out there that say everyone is welcome to enjoy it, no charge. And so, you know, we need to change that perception. Parking, you know, and this is sort of a good news thing. We went and Paige went out and she counted all the spaces and what they were allocated to. And during our traffic analysis, which took place in part of August, part of September, there was always parking spots available. The only time the lot was filled was July 4th. So at this time, we think that we're sufficient, but know that post-COVID, we probably should go and take a look at this again. And when we do that, near-term things that we could do is restripe the lot to create more spots, and even longer term, then if we need to, pave another lot. So there are options, but we don't really feel like that needs to be undertaken at this point in time. Okay, so here's the one with lots of fine print on it, non-property owner access. And so I'm not going to read through all of this. I think all of this we've gone through before, but essentially it's the notion that non-property owners are accessing Tugaloo Family Park, and this has caused dissension with various Teleco Village residents. And there's the notion that Tugaloo is a private, family-oriented park. That's the way that the signs read and everything else. And that, long story short, non-property owners have been using it with resulting in complaints from residents based on the fact that Teleco Village property owners pay for this, or they contribute to it financially, where non-property owners do not. I will tell you that, and these are broad numbers here, annual expense for Tugaloo based on 2019 and 20 expense, and I didn't put the revenue that's generated from the Tugaloo area. Estimated about $20,000, which turns out to be about $3.15 per each household's annual property owner assessment. So there's that number. So on the recommendations, well, the cost to maintain Tugaloo for each property owner is low. The team recommends the following trial to be implemented in the spring of '21 as follows. What we are advocating is issuing non-resident seasonal short-term usage passes and daily passes at the Welcome Center. Identification will be required to obtain a pass. So this is good because this way we will know everyone who's down at the beach because they will have signed in in order to get a pass. Simon will develop a rate structure, recommendation, and logistics for these passes. We recommend funding a parking attendant from May until September. Simon will determine the actual hours and days the attendant will be present, and as you'll see in the next couple of slides, the funding required to do that. As well, we want to fund a shelter for the said attendant to be down there. And furthermore, we are suggesting is we start a trial of this in the spring of '21, and then midsummer, the Recreation Advisory Committee, and then to the board to review and reassess for longer-term implementation. So again, this is a trial, but it's something that we think is a good next step. Going on, non-property owner entrance for open events. So when there's a car club or there's a shuttle to, leave your car and shuttle to the yacht club or whatever. We do have those one-offs, and do we charge people fees for that? And on this one, we're looking to Simon to recommend guidelines to handle one-offs like this because, this gets into the think about what you can enforce before you make another rule. So that's kind of where we're at there. Oh, see how I went right by the money slide. Okay. So the cost to implement this, and these are in broad strokes, if somebody wants all of the nitty-gritty, I'm more than happy to give it to you. Staff cost, and again, this is to have an attendee from May through, starting in May through September, to man the attendant shed, if you will, down there, and then $5,000 to purchase said shed. And then the $2,000 is for the signage that I mentioned initially, that, you know, we need to just do a better job of figuring out what is the appropriate signage overall and get it done. And then just a note on how this 17,000 works out. That comes to about $2.70 increase to our current households, annual assessment. And the revenue from non-property owner attendees isn't considered here. So all of that will be extra money into the recreation revenue. And the tough shed, if we decide that we're not gonna, that the trial isn't gonna be implemented, the tough shed can certainly be repurposed elsewhere. So, just in summary, and I'm not gonna read all of this to you, but, you know, most people enjoying what we found through our traffic analysis, most people enjoying the Tugaloo. Our property owners are their guests. However, we do have other people outside of the village that routinely do come to Tugaloo. Yes, Bruce?
Do we have any percentages with that, those numbers? I mean, many and most don't tell me a whole lot, but
Okay, and I ran through these numbers with you probably on my last two updates, but
still about the same?
yeah, I mean.
Because last time I didn't think we included Labor Day, so that would.
Oh, yeah, okay, so, but yeah, so it's really 80-20. So 80% property owners and their guests, and 20% non-property owners.
And those 20% include people just dropping in there to eat lunch or use the bathroom? Yes.
Yes, yeah, so I mean, you have, but primarily
So they actually, the ones using the beach per se is probably a pretty low percentage.
No, and that's why I'm hesitating, because of that 20%, most of them are going to the beach.
I'd like to see those numbers.
And I remember those numbers, and my first vision is, this is how many people went, and this is how many people went to the beach, and then we had this number of people that didn't pay or refused or some such number. But as I recall, it was about 80-20, and the majority of those that followed through, and I thought Bruce had it right here, but I could be wrong. I'm thinking that it was the next highest percentage were the people that came in that turned around because they couldn't use the restroom or something. Then the next one was the smallest number, and that was the ones that said, I do want to go to the beach. But that's just my memory. But I do remember this 80-20 between the two. Because at the time, you remember, I was still down there picking up
Right.
trash, and the trash issue was not improving, even though there were less
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, and basically, that's what the next point here says is, you know, essentially, no. The notion that non-property owners were creating the trash issues, the behavior issues, the, you know, name your issue, would be very hard to substantiate. So, and going forward, so regardless of any of that, we are still suggesting that we recommend doing the, let's see here, regardless of addressing these concerns, it's necessary to address it, and we came up with the recommendations that we came up with. And foremost of these was the fact that property owners felt it was unfair for non-property owners to be there without some kind of compensation, which, of course, our recommendation has addressed. And again, midsummer of '21, we will ask the Recreation Committee to come back to the board with a review of how the trial has gone and recommend how we move forward.
So Sue, I've got two questions. One is, one of your slides, you talk about issuing the pass. So does that mean if somebody drives into Tugaloo, they'll be directed to go to the Welcome Center to get a pass? So they have
Yes.
to do that and then come back?
Yes.
And then they'll have to pay for whatever the charge is
Yes.
there? Okay. And then your other, just a clarification question, you, in this one slide, you say $2.70 increase to current households' annual assessment. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah, so in other words, and very early on, before the Tugaloo Committee even got formed, the question was asked, what percentage, and I think Mitzi probably ended up answering it because she had all the numbers, but what, if we were to take a look at what our assessment is, the dollars that we pay in our assessment on an annual basis, what does the cost for Tugaloo represent? And currently, it's $3.15 or something like that. What I'm adding to that is this $17,000 next year will represent another $2.70 over that. So if you add
Okay.
315 and
So-
270, yeah.
But I guess the point of me bringing that up is, we're not adding $2.70 to people's assessment. Oh, no. Yeah, just when.
I'm just, no,
Just in case
I'm just
somebody's
saying,
watching.
I'm just saying,
Understood.
yeah. When you do the pie, when you do the pie, and if you take what you pay annually, so not monthly, annually, and I was hoping that would drive that home without me doing a pie chart of the assessment. Think about what $5.85 of your entire assessment looks like.
Pennies, penny a day.
However, the pie stays the same size, and so that $2.70 gets taken from somewhere, right? And now we have implemented a situation to charge people so that they pay, some fair share of utilizing a beach, which is, that system is going to cost us more money. $2.70 a year per property owner.
Well, no, and number one, it won't be $2.70 every year, because some of that is a one-time cost. So the shed is a one-time cost.
But the employee is a recurring cost every year,
It would be a recurring.
which I assume is the
a-
highest part of this
Yeah,
expense.
it'd be a recurring cost if at the end of the trial, we decide to go forward.
Right,
I
so,
guess it just seems crazy to me to spend that much money to collect a small portion of money to go toward it. I don't know. I mean, I guess, so here's the thing that I'm thinking as you're talking about this. If we spend $17,000, in order to recoup that cost, we have to get $5 each from 3,400 cars in a 5-month period. So we're not going to recoup that cost. That's going to come from the property owner's pocket. So when we've tried to establish a situation to recoup costs, it's costing us money. And then the second thing is of that 3,400 cars, that's 10 to 14,000 guests. And I think based on the data that you guys have collected out there, there's no way that we're going to have that many. And I just think that adding the little extra complication of somebody comes to the beach, send them to the Welcome Center, send them back to the beach.
well, the
I don't
reason
know,
we
I think
did that
seem
is
a little
because
crazy.
it's our notion that the person that's going to be sitting at the beach is not at a staff level that we want them to be responsible for collecting money from people. We just didn't feel like that was what we wanted to do.
So what's the cost associated with the season and day passes?
That hasn't been determined yet. That's something that Simon needs to work through.
Do you think that that we will collect a whole lot more money, a lot more information, continuing the trial that we did this year? Do you think the numbers will be significantly different?
Do I think, personally, I don't think the numbers are going to be significantly different. Yes? Pat?
To address Carla and the cost, and you and I talked about this, and I won't bring up everything we talked about, but the issue here is that I think we determined there was about $27,000 we were maintaining Tugaloo in this year's budget. So when you look
Well,
at
that's what the budget is, but
Yeah.
actuals tell us that it's probably more like 20,000.
Sure, $27,000. Then you add in a couple of bucks more. Okay, so then you add another 15,000, so now you got 35,000. What we're talking about is at some point, are we gonna look at this as a paid amenity? A pay-to-play amenity like golf or everything else? And that is not what we're talking about here. We're still talking about a free amenity for the general public. But the outcry, the hundreds and hundreds of messages that we received, next door, telegram, teleflash, emails, personal contacts and all that, was to finally once and for all get a grip on Tugaloo. That was it. And we started the process late in the year. And we did not get good data, but the data that we got showed a very good strategy. And you implemented a team, and those folks went out, and since I've been on those teams before, know how they put their personal time and energy and efforts into there to make this what you're presenting today. And what you're telling me is that, if I'm hearing correct, it is still selected to be a free amenity to Teleco Village, which was one of my concerns. As I told you, when the 80-year-old lady's daughter finally got up the courage to get on an airplane, come visit her mother after 5 months, and they were sitting out there watching a sunset. That's something that you can't at 6 o'clock in the evening go to the Welcome Center and get a card and go back and watch the sunset. It needs to be free, but the concerns need to be addressed. It's not a money issue at this point, but it could be, and that's what you're telling me, that continuation of the shed and the employees and the maintenance and all that.
You died.
Further into next year, correct? Yeah, no, I pushed the button.
Every once in a while on this side it dies.
No, no, he's off.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It
He
dies.
can't, it won't come back on.
Oh.
So anyway, my take on this is that the base background information is telling me that it's staying a free amenity for everybody.
It's staying a free amenity for property owners.
Property
in Teleco
owners, right.
Village,
And
right.
guests.
And if.
And guests.
And if there are people outside that want to, because they've been doing this for years and years, and they bring their grandkids over, and we haven't seen any issues with those people, they can go get a pass. Thank you. They can go get a pass and continue to use Tugaloo as they've done in the past, and they just meld right into us, as all of us have seen, okay?
But their past cost them.
That's right.
Correct.
And it's not to generate the cost of paying for Tugaloo.
Exactly.
It is to generate the responsibility of, I went and got this, so now you're going to hold me accountable because you have my name, and I'm
Right.
going to pick up myself, and I'm going to be a good citizen at Tugaloo. And during the meantime, because we started late, I'm hearing you say that we're going to continue that process with that shed and that employee to capture that data to get more information that we may be able to use and/or improve with
Right.
more reliable long-term data.
Yes, it'll
that-
give us,
So not a cost.
No,
Recovery.
and that's why I asked her, how much more and what, better information are you gonna get to continue this trial?
okay, so
And if you think you're not gonna get any better information, then let's make a decision now.
no, because we need to test out our inclination that having an attendant at Tugaloo day in and day out is going to be a positive improvement for Tugaloo. I don't think we want to put that in there permanently, or say we're putting it in there permanently. I think doing a half a summer test on this, and that's what the team recommended, and that's, I think Simon agrees with that as well, that putting that in there for half a summer when we can get, let me say, more normal traffic data, if you will. I mean, we relied quite a bit on tail end of season when kids had already gone back to school, whatever that means, and Labor Day weekend. So we would like to get something that shows us, okay, after school is out, you know, what does our traffic really look like?
Well, if that's your purpose, is to just get more information, I would treat it then as less than a permanent structure. I would say that we do it like we did up at the Wellness Center with a tent, continue tent through your study instead of moving toward a permanent solution. Again, we have collected enough data, I believe, that you point out that the outsiders coming in here aren't the culprit. We, the people, the homeowners that we're trying to offer this thing to free, they're the culprit. We're the culprit. We ourselves, we need to look inward instead of, you know, seemingly putting all the blame on a few people that we have coming in here from outside.
Okay.
Do we know what impact that will have on the Welcome Center staff? I mean, has that been discussed with them as far as who's going to be, I don't know if they're normally set up to take money in there. Do they,
Simon,
are gonna do this
did you
through-
talk, you didn't talk to Beth? Oh, Mitzi was going to talk to Beth? I'm sorry.
Not that I necessarily,
Oh,
can you turn green up? All right. Not that I necessarily care of my staff, but my part-time staff taking money, I don't know how that would be any different from a staff member down there taking money.
okay.
I mean, it's not a full-time person. My people would just be, all my receptionists are part-time as well, so I don't
Okay.
see the big, it would be easier if they just did it there for the person, I think, but that was my only thing, is they're all part-time people.
Yeah, okay. Well, obviously, there's more that we need to do to look into how this would go into operation. So,
And one other suggestion I would have, if you're thinking about redoing the signage, which regardless of what else happens, I think that's a good idea. I would suggest, and this is going to be no big surprise to Simon, but to get with Gary Mulliner and the Woodworking Club, they put together some really beautiful kiosks. And I think we can do that for pretty low cost, probably cost of materials, if I had to guess.
I mean,
So-
instead of buying the tough shed?
No, the signage, for
Oh,
the
the
signage.
signage. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
If you look at some of the kiosks that they've put throughout the village, they are very professional and top-notch, and I don't know why we would need to do anything other than that. I can't imagine it'd be any better than that, so I would encourage you to do that, and maybe,
Well, we can look into that. The only thing I can think of is that there's a lot of verbiage on those things.
yeah, well, the historic kiosks that Gary's put throughout the village, some of them have a ton of verbiage on them. Would you agree, Simon? I don't think that's out of his scope of possibility, and not just Gary, but the people he works with. He works with graphic designers and printers and stuff like that. I mean, he's put together
Okay.
some pretty detailed kiosks throughout
Well,
the village
and you know
that
what,
are really nice.
I really looked at, I mean, this is Simon's operation, so I looked to Simon to figure out what the best path forward is on that.
Yep, you're
You
live.
gotta be turned on.
Check. It might be easier if I'm sitting up here if you have questions.
Yeah, so I mean,
If it's this going to, it says to Simon Bradbury, it's coming to me and the Recreation Committee that will take a look at this whole project and come back with what's the recommendation. The question on the signs, that's absolutely something we could look at. You can also rent these sheds too, so you're not purchasing something. You go month-to-month rental instead of purchasing something. That's an option too.
I just think, again, I agree with you. We need to minimize our costs here and not treat them as if they're going to go beyond the study, because we don't know. So minimize it, kind of like the way we did this year, collect your data. You may not have to go a full year of, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you, season starts in May, maybe you go through the end of June, something like that, to collect your data. And then we'll make a decision. And then we'll, if we need a permanent structure, we put one in. But right now, I would leave it as an ad hoc, not ad hoc, but a temporary thing, yeah.
Okay. Notwithstanding, we still need to be able to know whether Simon is going to get funding for another person through that trial. So, you know, maybe we need to allocate some kind of funding for that.
Can we get another intern for that?
That'd be nice. I don't think so.
So,
And it's not just, we are collecting data, but it's also managing it at the expectations that y'all would like that park to be managed.
Yeah.
I feel like it needs somebody down there,
Yeah,
at least to start off, and start the season and say, okay, we're taking it back, this is how we're gonna operate it now.
he's right. This isn't about necessarily collecting more data. This is about how we are going to manage the park.
Right.
You know, how we are going to control access to non-property owners, and in the process, you know, probably discourage a lot of them from coming.
I think there's still maybe a question of whether we want to discourage
yeah, do
access
we?
as opposed to how.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know. I read those 150 to 200 emails, and
Well,
I
but
tell you,
that's,
there's a lot
that's a
of people
small
that don't
percentage
want
of the
to.
total number of people we have in the village.
And when
It's
we
not
looked,
an accurate survey.
when we analyzed the data, there were, I think, more that were opposed to putting some, well, now this was when they
No,
were
I don't
talking
think
about
that
a
was
gate.
true.
Yeah, well, I have
There
the
were
data.
a number of people that were opposed to restricting access, but it certainly didn't approach the number that wanted access. I mean,
I think we should relook at that data.
Yep.
Because my recollection is that we had at least as many who were opposed to some sort of security
Yeah,
measures as we had that were
Yeah, and
for it.
I did. And don't look at it by numbers of comments made, look at it by name.
Right.
You had some of those people that
I know.
30, 40 times in a post.
Well, I'm talking about the data that was gathered and given to us by the staff. So when there was a submission form put on the website and people
Right.
submitted
And-
their comments, those were
Can-
individual comments, not multiples from
And
one
so,
person.
and to that end, and I know, Ken, I'm getting to you. Let me just say, so the way that I chose to handle that is, okay, these are the comments that are coming in, and now we're going to take those perceived issues and we're going to go find out facts and data about these perceived issues. Once we know what the facts and data are, we are going to make recommendations based on facts and data, not on how many people said this or that. And some things were unfounded. Number one thing that was unfounded is it absolutely must be the people that are non-property owners creating all these problems. We can't say that. So, yes, sir.
The other comment, since you seem to be wrapping up to give to Ken, I would challenge the people that were on Nextdoor and responded to the survey that we had. A number of those people hadn't been down there for 2 to 6 years. And were still making comments that they saw something half a decade ago. Alice and I've gone down there a couple of times every week since this has been going on, and before then. If you want to see something that is about to transform, when this dog park, which they just seeded, and they put their sprinklers in, you need to start going down there and taking some time-lapse photographs to see what this place is like. The beach is immaculate, the grass is immaculate, it is clean, it is the nicest place to go, and just to sit down in the parking lot and eat a cheese sandwich and watch the people go back and forth is just a pleasure to do in the afternoon. And if you have not enjoyed this free amenity, you need to, rather than hang on to this picture of 5 or 6 years ago when I'm sure it was dirty or nasty the day you saw it, but it is now changed and you need to go look at it. And as the
Agreed.
grass grows in the dog park, it's going to change from that hillside being
That's
brown
orange, yeah.
to being manicured.
Right.
Holy cow, is it going to be pretty then?
I agree, and I also think that it's insightful of you, Sue, and the committee, and Simon to say we need to continue to gather data and, you know, look at things as we go forward, because one of the things that may have driven some traffic to our beach this past summer was the fact that the public beach there at 321 and
Right,
444
exactly.
was
So
closed.
like everything else, it was a weird year. But the other thing I do want to, and thanks Rick for reinforcing the fact that, you know, the one thing that we did find by having an individual down there, we do feel like that changed behavior a little bit. People would come up to the booth and they would go to that person and ask a question or whatever. And like I say, I kind of almost, I liken it to a park ranger almost, that kind of a thing. It's not somebody who's a police person, but it's someone who's there to help with the environment. That's the way, and we all found it very rewarding, I think, going down there and participating in all of that. And we genuinely found the people on the beach found that it was an asset. And so I know we just got done going through lots of dollars this morning, and here's a couple more. But I feel like, you know, that we believe, having been down there daily, it is something, it's a minimal amount of money that will add to that asset.
See, my problem with that is you've made a decision already. And
No,
what I'm
I
saying
haven't
is-
made a
Got a trial.
decision, I've put a recommendation out.
You're gonna have to do the signage one way or another.
Well, I don't have any
Okay.
problem with the signage, but
But
signage
what-
is not gonna cost you
hold it, hang on.
$17,000.
What's being proposed by this group that did all of this work is a trial.
Well, I don't have a problem with that, but you should do the trial at minimum cost.
Well, I'm
Because-
not suggesting that you do anything permanent.
Well, you're saying 17,000, it shouldn't cost.
17,000 includes the personnel costs.
Well,
So it's $9,000 for the personnel from May to September. So if the trial, you know, if we decide to dump it in the end of June or whatever, that's however many dollars less there. And, yeah, if we decide we want to rent a tough shed, that's less dollars there. The signage is the signage. That recommendation's not going to go away. That cost is not going to go away because we feel like that is lacking down there and needs to be replaced one way or the other.
okay, I guess what I see, it boils down to, are we willing to spend $17,000 a year,
Not a year.
even through trial? If we're willing to spend that much just to keep a few people out of there?
And that is not the aim at this point. It is not the aim to spend this money to keep people out of there. The aim and what this funding would represent is, again, bolstering up and making this an even better asset. Let's make it clear to people through better signage exactly how people need to act or not act. Let's provide an individual down there so that there's a touch point for people that are down at that beach or anyone else down there. That's what this is all about. It is not at all, it is no longer about keeping people out. That is, if we ended up anywhere on this team, that's one of the places that we ended up. This is not about keeping people out.
So quick question, will that then appease, I'm sorry, Pat, will that appease the people who made all the comments that they don't want, that they want it to be an exclusive amenity for Teleco Village property owners? I mean, if this, you see what I'm asking you, is does this accomplish what we've been asked to review?
It's a compromise.
Okay.
Well,
And in fact, the five individuals that were on this committee from the community, many of them said, put in a gate.
and here's what.
And through compromise, they came to another solution.
And here's what I would,
Well,
can
but
I
let's
answer your
finish that-
question?
Finish that, though. Did that, were they happy with that? Did they feel like
Yes.
that solved the problem to come, this compromise solved the problem? That's really all I wanted to know, is if they felt like, as representatives of the people in the community who wanted a gate, that they would be happy with this compromise. Okay.
And, well, and I will tell, I'm getting to you, Pat,
I'm
and I'm gonna
patient.
get to you, Ken. And I will tell you, when we took this on, we were very clear to say that the definition and scope of the work of this team was, is there a gate or is there not a gate? That was not the goal of this team. The goal of this team was to research said or perceived issues, determine what the facts about those issues were, and come up with recommendations to work on those issues. Nowhere in there did it say, make a determination on keeping people out. Nowhere in there did it say, do we gate or do we not gate? Yes, sir.
To Bruce, here's basically what it comes down to. If you don't have somebody down there, if you don't have a policeman on Teleco Parkway, they're going to pull out in front of you. They're going to tailgate you all the way to the North City. They're going to run 80 miles an hour. They're going to run 25 miles an hour. They're going to throw cigarette butts on the golf course. They're going to throw cigarette butts on Tanasi. You're going to have volunteer litter angels to pick up until you get somebody sitting at a tent acting as a park ranger because they know the park ranger sitting down there and I'm going to behave myself. That's what it's boiled down to. The trash before we did this, the trash audit during, and the trash audit afterwards did not change until the park ranger got down there. And here we are, mature individuals that have amassed a fortune, chose to live here, and we need a babysitter to change our behavior. It's a crying shame, but that's what it boils down to. And it's going to cost us 17 grand to get a babysitter to sit down there so that we change our behavior. God bless us all.
So is the cost of the passes and I'm assuming there's going to be no enforcement of that, the hours that there's not an attendant there, right? So if you come and park there if you don't have a pass and there's no attendant, then that's not going to be enforced. There's not going to be like drive-bys or anything like that from the public works staff.
No, there's not going to be drive-bys, no. But we have the other things in the recommendations that will help monitor the beach. The idea of, okay, let's put the motion detectors down there. Let's make sure we're monitoring and we have just about as close to 100% of that area surveilled as possible. So we're doing those things. I mean, I think it would be ridiculous to say, all right, we are stationing someone down here 24/7. That's sort of ridiculous. You're not
Totally
going to do
agree.
that.
No,
Yeah.
I totally agree. I just wanted to make sure that was the only time. So the only other, this is my last comment, I promise, I won't say anything else about it today.
Oh, sure.
Today. The brochures telling people about, the rules and regulations of the beach, I think might just be adding to our litter problem. So I'd maybe rethink how to distribute that information.
Okay, noted. Ken, do you still have a question?
I got some questions.
It goes to Carla's
Oh,
point.
sorry, Steve, just one sec. Go ahead, Ken.
It goes to Carla's point. Do we know when that beach is going to reopen down on near the dam?
We have no idea at this point.
Have we asked the question?
I've asked the question in the past, and they've basically said when we get to it.
Okay. But I think that has some impact on it.
Oh,
Of course
yeah,
it
we
does.
know
Yeah,
it does. And that's why we know that like I said, with everything else in 2020, these are unusual patterns of movement. So that's why, taking up and looking at this again and documenting again in the spring, if things are any better than they are now, should help us.
Well, there's a group that doesn't want the beach to become private, okay, become private. And the real issue, it seems to me, is keeping the beach clean, keeping the beach policed, and watching those behaviors down at the beach. So to put somebody at the entrance doesn't really address the beach itself.
Yeah, it does, because what we do is, what that individual does is every once in a while, they go out and they do a little walk around the beach, and you'd be surprised, like I said, just because that person has a Teleco Village Rec polo shirt on, it's amazing the reaction, and that
Well, I think
people are happy to have them down there.
I think that makes sense, and that may be another option to look at, rather than having people, send people to buy a pass and all these other things. If somebody's at the beach, that might be a really good idea without doing all the other things. Just another thought. And the other thing is, if you're a boat owner, so your guests on your boat will also have to get a pass or not?
Oh, I would say no, because just like when a property owner is at the beach with their guests, I would think it would be the same way.
If they drive in at separate times, how's the guy at the gate gonna know that?
You know, and this is one of those, we don't want to overregulate this thing. I mean, good Lord, the parking for the boats is right there, and I mean, honestly, we had one of these things come up when I was down there one day, and it would be, I mean, basically, it's got to be, okay, if you know you're going to have a guest coming, you know, be waiting for them right at the beginning of your dock so you can hail them down. I mean, some of this is sort of common sense stuff, I think.
Is it possible that we could implement some of your rules that you're concerned about for cleanliness, et cetera, without having someone serving as a marshal? And
I don't,
then
you're not going to
see
be a
if-
marshal.
Or whatever. Then we could see how it goes with cleanliness and stuff, and then see if we need to do something different. I mean, do your trial a little different. Let's do everything short of having somebody there collect money
I'm going to get him.
to see if we could do a trial with your improvements, your signage, your lights, your
My
security cameras,
gut
et cetera.
says no, but hold that thought. Steve?
I got 3 comments.
Oh, can't hear you, Steve.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Not yet.
There you are.
Can you hear me?
Better.
All right, 3 comments. First one is your estimated 17,000 is way understated. If you look at your recommendations, there's no money in the budget here for cameras, motion detectors, sound machines, etc. So that's one item.
Can I answer that one? So the cameras
No, I
are,
just-
the cameras are already there. The motion detector lights, that would be handled under the rec operational budget. What was your other one?
Well, that's new money, so the reason you're spending it's because your recommendation. So, the other item is, there's a lot of problem solving going on. Simon's gonna come back with a business plan on how to manage this area.
That's
I would
right.
suggest we let Simon come back with a recommendation. And number 3 is if we're deciding we wanna have some type of control over the area, it's gonna cost you money. More of the same is gonna get you the same results. So if you're gonna say we're not gonna spend any money, you're gonna be uncontrolled. So we just need to make sure we got money in Simon's budget to take care of, whether it's 10 grand or 20 grand, put something in there to cover our costs.
And that's what this is.
Right.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
Again, we don't want to make it like a Marshall.
Right.
It's a beach park. It's a beautiful beach park. It's an amenity here. And I think what's happened is over the years, we had guidelines, we had rules, but there's no enforcement of it. And the village has grown. There's more user groups down there. You've got the dog park down there. You got boat docks. You got a lot of people coming down there. Looking at it, if we had some behaviors, we had some things we wanted to upgrade, and to manage it, I look at it just like one of our other facilities. I wouldn't leave Chota without a staff. I wouldn't leave the pickleball courts and tennis without a staff member. That many people going on, particularly if we want to establish a new way of doing things, we start that with staff, and we can always wean back from that. But right now, unless you have somebody down there, it's going to be very hard to control that. It's already proven that. And you can always break it and do it half the cost and do it for half the summer and do a trial and look at it that way. And I did it as frugal as possible.
I'm just a little bit worried that this is the first step in many steps that we're going to make ourselves an exclusive neighborhood. For example, what happens down in Kahidi if people down there decide they want to go and use the playground? We're not marshaling that playground.
Yeah.
We're not marshaling that pavilion down there.
Yeah, it's not a police officer down there. It's just like you
No,
go.
I mean, we're not even checking on it. So, what's next is my question. That's a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer it.
Yeah, we're just.
Planning to.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? So at this point, I mean, I don't know. I mean, basically, we put our recommendations forward. We indicated what we felt were the expense items. We talked about that earlier today in budget, so for my part, that's what I have to present. And that's it.
Okay, thanks, Sue. Okay, that brings us to advisory committee and liaison reports. By the way, were there any comments from outside?
So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Okay. And the first one is Ken Litke for the HOA.
You can go to the next slide, please. And there I am at better times.
Without a mask.
And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again to Rick and the POA board for inviting me here today to present an HOA update. Let's go to the next one, please. Okay, just like we talked earlier about the long-range planning, I'd like to start off with talking about our mission. And the last time I addressed this, we did the same thing. And there's likely some new people to the village listening in today, so that's why I want to start. I'd like to explain what the HOA does, what we've been doing, and why it's good to be a member of the HOA. And the HOA mission, as you can read here, is to deliver value to Teleco Village homeowners through informative and engaging programs while promoting social fellowship, civic responsibility, and providing a voice for homeowner concerns. And that's kind of a long sentence, but it can be summarized in the next slide, please. So basically, this is what we're about. We advocate resident concerns and provide information on issues impacting residents, and we provide social opportunities. And all this supports our motto of be engaged, be informed, and be heard. Next slide. Okay, my last update to the POA board was in July, and obviously a lot has transpired since then with COVID-19. So with all this headwind, how does the HOA continue to try and accomplish these objectives safely, I'll emphasize safely, through this pandemic? Next slide. Probably the best way for anyone to view what the HOA has been doing, accomplishing so far this year, we plan to accomplish, is to simply go to the HOA website where we have posted our goals and objectives, as you can see here. This was posted at the beginning of the year, and we've recently, in the end of September, put another update in, and where we stand today. There are a number of goals we set out to accomplish this year, but in the interest of time, I will only provide detail on a few of the important ones this afternoon. Next slide. Okay, the goal here. Keep HOA members informed, especially on impact and controversial topics, by working closely with the POA and select village organizations. And we have continued to do that by regularly attending POA and other key meetings in the village, other organizations. And fortunately, virtual organizations have gone to some form of online meeting, which has been very helpful and very safe as well. So we're continuing to do that. We have published monthly the Voice of the Village email, which contains, is that on? I hope so. Containing timely information for homeowners, including local and county updates. And with COVID, we have not been able to hold our regular, large, open village meetings at the community church, so we have moved online to emails to provide this information to our members in a series of special, we call them special Voice of the Village emails. And some of the topics there have been the U.S. 2020 census. We had great turnout on that. The August 6th primary and general election, again, great success, I think, with that. And now the November 3rd general election. We've also online created resources for COVID-19 information, a number of links. Next slide. So I'd like to highlight this most recent special election update we sent out. And obviously the upcoming election has generated a lot of discussion in the press and media about how votes are cast, the safety and security of the ballots, and measures in place to ensure that all votes cast get counted and votes are not cast more than once. So as part of our special series on the election, November 3rd election, Dennis Doherty, our HOA Vice President of Programs, reached out to Susan Harrison, the Loudoun County Administrator of Elections, to get a more detailed understanding about how the voting process works. And we put together this update and sent it out to our members. And it focused on educating voters on how votes are cast, recorded, and votes are securely managed. We've received a lot of positive feedback on this particular edition of our emails, and we'll continue with more of them as we get closer to the election. We've also reached out to Monroe County for information from them as well, and when we get it, we'll provide the information to our via another update. Next slide. Goal: implement advocacy strategies by identifying and prioritizing issues having current or future impact on HOA members. Work effectively with appropriate parties to help ensure positive, timely resolutions. And I've listed some of the things we've been working on. The Asian Carp. We have submitted letters from the HOA to the TVA Board of Directors for their board meetings, working on air quality, water pressures, drainage issues. And recently, to increase our HOA involvement, we have reached out to Kahidi to identify specific issues where the HOA may be able to assist them. Next, please. Promote the implementation of community management business best practices to the benefit of all villagers. We have created guidelines for restarting of our events, and we have posted it online, which it's out there for anyone to look at. It's updated every 2 weeks. We look at the numbers in Loudoun and Monroe County, and we update it. We've worked with the POA, which is discussed at prior meetings, on implementation of their help spot for issue reporting and tracking, which went live. And from all reports I hear, it's working very well. I've had a lot of comments from a number of people, and hats off to the IT team, the POA, and Public Works and all that. It seems to be working very well. As mentioned in previous meeting, we brought to light some issues with RV parking, which have been addressed with several improvements. And much earlier on in the year, we worked with POA in implementing the meeting scheduling tool. So these are just some of the areas we're working on. Next slide. As I mentioned earlier at the last meeting, we have been able to now restart our welcome orientations. We had one in July and one on the 17th of September, utilizing the Teleco Pavilion, and it worked out very well there. Now, with the start of cold weather, we're going to move that indoors, and on November 19th, we'll have our next one at the Yacht Club in the lower level. Next slide. Through social activities, HOA helps promote and maintain the social fabric of the village, which we all enjoy. Unfortunately, as I said, we've had to cancel our large monthly socials, where we have short meetings and signups for social events due to COVID. But we've been able now to hold a limited number of social events. And for these social events that we are having, we are posting clearly on our event flyers our safety precautions that are being put in place. And our event signups and information are all available on Teleco Life. These are some of the events we've had in September, and upcoming ones in October, and also in the holiday season. In October, we're having an event called Singo. It's like bingo with singing. Again, at Tvpoa. We have a boat cruise through the locks, dining out at Carmichael's, a fall centerpiece making event, and we're having a Christmas tree lighting as we did this year, and details will be forthcoming soon on that as well. And you can see they're being well received. They're getting sold out as fast as we put them up. Unfortunately, we've had some cancellations. We've had to cancel the holiday gala. We just couldn't put it on as due to a number of factors. No dancing is one of them, and other limitations. Holiday cocktail parties as well, we've had to cancel, and as well as the Tennessee Titans versus Chicago Bears event. Golf, on the positive side, golf has has been a rock. It's been steady throughout the year and continues on. So they've done a good job with golf. Next slide. I'd like to focus for a minute on an important event coming up. I'd like to remind everyone of the upcoming Poa Candidates Forum, which will be held Thursday, October 22nd, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. With COVID restrictions, we will not have open seating here. It will be held in this room. We will not have open seating, but we will broadcast this, similar to today, what's happening today, and taped as well for those who can't be here, can't watch live. We're also looking to have seating downstairs for up to 100 people with a TV and a live feed from this room, hopefully to downstairs as well for those who want to come here and be at least in the same building. And this is your opportunity to hear the three candidates running for elective offices to present themselves and respond to questions of interest to Teleco residents. We are right now soliciting questions, and we've already received quite a few to present. And we plan to boil these questions down to the most important and applicable to the majority of residents. Right now, I'm planning to be the moderator of this event, and I just hope I can do as good a job as Chris Wallace did. That's time for the joke, laugh. Okay. All right. And keep watching for updates and specifics for this meeting as we get closer to the event date. Okay, next slide. The membership drive, and hopefully about what I presented briefly today, our HOA advocacy efforts continue to bring significant value as well as our social events to the value of an HOA membership. I would ask that you please keep these advocating efforts along with social offerings in mind as we begin our annual HOA membership drive, which began October 1st. By renewing your membership and encouraging other non-members to join, you show your support of our ongoing and future advocating activities to help make Teleco Village a better place for all of us to enjoy. And it's simple to do. Just log on to Teleco Live, and please do it today while it's top of mind, and we thank you for in advance. Last slide. So I think you can see that HOA has been very active during these trying times to fulfill our mission to our members in Teleco Village. I would like to thank my board for all their hard work during these past months and future months to come. Thanks. Now, if anybody has any questions,
for Ken?
pleased to answer.
Well, Ken, thank you so much.
I'll thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, the next liaison report is from our Asian Carp Committee. Carla, you're up.
All right. Well, Jim's coming to the table for all you Braves fans. Dansby Swanson hit a home run in the second inning, so the Braves lead 1-0 over the Marlins right now in their National League Division Series playoff game. Anywho. Yeah, they won yesterday too. Okay, so Asian Carp, time to talk about the fish. And Mr. James Riley, who is a Teleco Village resident, he moved to East Tennessee from Ottawa, Illinois, and his previous home was on the Fox River, which is near the confluence with the Illinois River, about 90 miles from Chicago. And he currently resides in the Kahiti neighborhood. And Jim has agreed to come and talk with us today. We've had some representatives come and talk to us. We've had a scientist from the TVA. We've had an elected official from the U.S. Congress. And now we have just a guy who knows exactly what happens when an infestation of Asian carp comes to your neighborhood. And so he's going to share with us a little bit of his experiences. Jim, welcome, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you very much. And by the way, the guy who's going to talk about fish, you could call him Jim instead of James. You know.
Okay.
But I am a flying carp refugee from Illinois. I'm no expert or scientist, as Carla very aptly described me, but I have survived an attack by flying carp. In Illinois, you do call them flying carp because that's what they look like when they explode out of the water. I know this is a serious threat, and so I'm today not wanting to make light of it, because when I heard the first little bit of discussion that they are on their way, I came to the conclusion that I wanted to get behind whatever efforts we could. So I have joined every organization I thought that would help, and I have tried to express my concern to anyone that would listen. The other thing that I know, or I believe strongly, is once they're here, there's no eradication. And what you're seeing now are some slides rolling through, and if you'll back up, let me just give, let me back to that slide. That's just a picture of our dock one day when we had, I'm a water skier, we had a bunch of guys together skiing. But that dock has been inundated with flying carp twice that I know of. Once my grandson and I were just standing down there visiting, I think we were cleaning the boat, and all of a sudden they just exploded and they were all over. Now, neither one of us got hurt. They were landing on the dock, they were landing in the boat, and then as quick as it started, it was over. That is not unusual. The one thing I can tell you about the Asian carp, in my experience, is they are more inclined to be in shallow water and be excited in shallow water, and outboards are more likely to excite them than, say, an inboard like mine. Now, saying all that, all boats will excite them, and many things that we don't understand seem to excite them, because more than once, what I explained about the dock happened, and many times in front of our home, all of a sudden it would just sound like a waterfall. And you'd look out there and it'd just be this massive explosion of carp. So in a number of times we pulled into the dock and had them in our boat. Once two of them hit our driver that pulled into the boat. Didn't hurt him, but scared him. The one thing I'll also say about Asian carp, if they get in your boat, you got a mess. When they fly, they void themselves, and when they land, they bleed and they stink. And so there's nothing good about these fish as far as I can tell, except I'm told they taste good, but I've never had that opportunity. We were in a cove very similar to out here in front of the yacht club, and one jumped in and barely missed my wife. So we've had some close calls, and we were just idling in an inboard. So it's unusual. You just never know. We also had a skier in the water one time, and before we even put the boat in gear, the fish just exploded around that individual. Thank goodness he was young. I think one of us old guys might have had a heart attack, because we were all scared when that happened. If you go to the next slide. This is a picture from our sunroom, looking down on what we would see 30 to 40 times a year on a weekly basis, 30 to 40 weeks a year. They being the Illinois Department of Conservation, would send in these commercial fishermen. They would set a net 300 yards apart, upstream and downstream of in front of our home. They would take those outboards, tip them up so that they were throwing water, making a lot of noise, and they'd pound on the side of those john boats. Those are 22 and 24-foot john boats. They don't look big there. They would fill 2 or 3 of those every week and then haul that off to a fertilizer plant in northern Illinois. We couldn't tell that it did any good, and this went on for at least 5 years while we lived there, the last 5 years before we left. So the next slide just gives you another view of these beautiful things. What I'm here to do is just explain a personal experience and the personal impact and the real life impact these will have if we, as a state and as a region, don't do everything we can to stop them. I believe the northern states have some workable solutions, and I think that if we could, we should be encouraging those in power to take immediate steps, temporary steps, to stop them from coming up the river, and then implement some of the already workable solutions. I see no reason, and again, not a scientist, just a practical old farm boy, I don't see any reason to reinvent a wheel that seems to be working. I'm going to let the next video, which was shot, I had nothing to do with this video, but this video was shot out in front of our home, and you'll see, if you knew our home, you'd see some of our shoreline. But Carl and I had to make sure the audio is shut off because it's got some colorful language in it. But I think it'll give you an idea. And of course, these guys are doing it for fun. But what you're going to see here is just what can happen or what does happen. That's right around the corner from our home. And the other thing I'll say as this is playing is the one advantage to flying carp is there's a whole new recreation going on in parts of Illinois now where they do bow fishing. When they fly, they try to shoot them with a bow. So I'll let this speak for itself, and I'll just say thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. We'll go ahead and let this video run, Shannon, while we go on and talk about, well, I don't know, it might be distracting because as you start to see some of these fish get riled up, you can see why that's not a desirable situation.
I had one hit me while I was skiing, and fortunately it was on my thigh, and I'm a big enough guy that it didn't knock me off my ski, but it sure hurt. Hadn't been hit that hard for a long time.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, this video was taken in the Illinois River. He's holding his jaw because he got hit in the face. As you see, he has a helmet with a face guard on.
Now, this is right at the two rivers. This is just, the bridge you see there is on the Fox River. The big bridge in the back is on the Illinois River.
Right. So that's the kind of activity and numbers that we're talking about. And so this is why we keep talking about keeping pressure on our elected officials as well as our governmental and environmental agencies, and you know, joining groups, joining commissions, encouraging people to write letters and be active in the efforts to keep these fish out of Teleco Lake. That just...
You can see why a water skier is kind of concerned about this.
Well, and you know, there's plenty of stories. If you do an internet search for these things, they've knocked people out of boats. They've knocked kids out of the boats. There was a gal in a fishing contest at, I believe, Kentucky Lake or Lake Barkley that got hit in the face and it broke her jaw while she was in this contest. So.
Jet skis are very much at risk with these too. So anyway, that's right in front of our home, right there. So.
Wow. And there they are in the boat. All right. Thank you again, Jim, for being here today, and I appreciate your efforts as well to keep these fish. I want you to continue to be a refugee and not be a victim again.
That's my plan.
So, going on in our presentation today, maybe, will it let me, can we go forward a slide, Shannon? Might have to stop the video. Okay, great. So basically, this is a story about how $8 million was almost lost. So in Michigan, the former governor, Rick Snyder, initially pledged $8 million to help block these invasive fish by accepting a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers plan to rebuild the Brandon Road Lock and Dam in Illinois. Unfortunately, the current governor, Gretchen Whitmer, vetoed the appropriation this year because she expected there to be budget shortfalls due to COVID-19. The people who were opposed to this noted the fish do not care about COVID-19, so they were adamant that they should continue their efforts. Thankfully, the budget shortfall was lower than originally predicted due to tax revenue, consumer spending, and federal relief. Some of the consumer spending was, as you could guess, the increased sales of outdoor recreation equipment, because when you can't do anything indoors, everyone goes outdoors. So that included fishing tackle, kayaks, and canoes. The irony of that is that they won't be selling outdoor recreation equipment if they have an Asian carp infestation, because their waterways basically become unusable for recreation, as you just saw in the video that Jim shared with us. This month, the U.S. Senate approved the funding to appropriate the $8 million to the Department of Natural Resources for Michigan's contribution to the project. And a coalition of conservation groups are praising the Michigan legislature's action in this regard. That is for the Brandon Road Lock and Dam project near Joliet, Illinois. And the project includes a gauntlet of smart technologies, including an electric barrier, a water bubble barrier, acoustic sound deterrents, and a flushing lock aimed at reducing the risk that Asian carp can transfer into Lake Michigan. The reason this is important to us is because these are the exact types of barriers that the TVA is testing in Kentucky Lake and Lake Barkley, that they are looking at using closer to us upstream on the Tennessee River, including the Watts Bar lock. The project at Brandon Road will simultaneously allow navigation to be maintained through the Chicago area waterway system, which I think is really important if you can keep from completely stopping transportation and yet get these barriers in place. That would be definitely a positive step. So that's happening in Michigan. What's happening in Tennessee? Governor Lee recently established a commission to address Asian carp, and he signed the executive order number 62, which I guess was the one right before 63 on the new COVID-19 regulations. But he established in that executive order the Asian Carp Advisory Commission to study and provide advice regarding the best methods for mitigating the invasion of Asian carp into the state's lakes and river systems. As Governor Lee said, Tennessee's lakes and rivers are a critical feature of our state's economy and natural beauty, and of course, to us here in Teleco Village, they are to us. So this commission is designed to help protect and preserve native fish species, aquatic life, commercial and recreational fishing, and other water activities from the increasing threat of Asian carp to key ecosystems in our state. And what's really important there, and you've heard it said several times by this board, by this Asian Carp Committee, by the Watts Bar Ecology and Fisheries Council, by the TVA, if the fish get into your waterway, they destroy the ecosystem because they eat at the very bottom of the food chain, which thereby pushes native fish out and they just take over. So let's see if I had anything else exciting. Oh, the members of the commission will include representatives from the TWRA, the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission, the Department of Economic and Community Development, which here's why that's important to us, because those are that is the agency that works to really protect property values, because they're developing the economy and the community in our area. So that's important, as well as the Department of Tourist Development, Environment and Conservation, the TVA, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, and then one appointee each from the governor, lieutenant governor, and speaker of the House of Representatives. And the board, the Teleco Village Governmental Affairs Advisory Committee, and the Asian Carp Ad Hoc Committee are recommending that a very highly qualified resident of Teleco Village, who is also a member of WATER, the water organization, be appointed to this commission. So we are writing and sending letters of recommendation for her. She is in Representative Burchett's district, so we're hoping that we get her appointed to this commission, which would be very helpful in helping our efforts to keep these Asian carp out. So the commission will provide reports in October and this winter, in addition to annual reports moving forward regarding its findings and work. And I always laugh at that annual reports because I feel like the urgency is so much more than that. And so just a reminder that the fish don't care about COVID-19. They are not waiting on us to get our act together. They're just doing their thing. So, am I doing that? Okay. So what you can do, again, as always, it seems like our consistent message is consistent pressure on elected officials, government, and environmental agencies. So updated information is always available on the tvpoa.org website under the News tab. Click on Asian Carp. This presentation will be there that has the information from Jim and the pictures and things like that. Also remember that sample letters and a contact list is found there on the website. So keep those letters and phone calls going to officials and agencies, reminding them that funding and urgent action is needed because the fish are not waiting for a COVID cure to migrate or spawn. So for updates, photos, and videos, be sure to visit the Facebook page, Stop Silver Carp in Tennessee. That's a great resource for current information. And that is all I have about Asian carp today. Any questions?
Just a comment, at the Oktoberfest the other day, I did meet with Lowell Russell, and he's all behind this, 100%, as far as getting someone from water on there. He's fully supportive of that.
That's great. I think that'll be really helpful. It'd be nice to have a representative of our community on that commission. All right, thank you very much.
Okay. So, we're going to move on to a major issue. And before I do that, I'd like to welcome Ty Ross of the Loudoun Utilities Board, who's joined us today, to watch us hopefully approve a water services agreement. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bruce, and Bruce is going to, brief the board on what's in the contract, and then we will vote on it.
Okay. I'd also like to recognize Nicole Curtis. Nicole Curtis is with the LUB as well. She is a top accountant, I believe. I don't know her official title, but I'll just say she's top dog in that area, Anyway, we welcome you guys here. They were kind enough to invite us to the board meeting that they had back on September 28th, where their board approved the draft LUB wholesale water agreement with POA, and so we return the favor, and we're glad you're here. So the way this is going to work, I will talk a little bit about it, the background, whatnot, then I'll let Kevin jump in and cover what's in the contract, and then I will come back and finish up with some things, comments, et cetera, and then ask for your approval. But also I'd like to thank Kevin. This has been 2 years in the making. He's been there right with me from the very get-go and working with this. And also like to thank Winston and his staff provided valuable input as we went through from an engineering and an economic standpoint. So, and the folks out at our engineering firm that supports us as well. Adam, can't think of his last name right now. Adam. Good old Adam. Anyway.
Who could ever forget?
Yeah, good old Adam. Adam Baird. Thank you, Adam. Okay, so our current contract, next slide, please. Our current contract expires soon. We could wait to the end of that contract to negotiate, but then we'd be up against the wall, and you kind of lose your ability to negotiate at that point in time. So we have been negotiating, like I said, for the last 2 years, and we're I think reached an agreement, as we'll point out later on, that benefits the both of us. A little background: the current contract was a fixed 20-year contract, and when I say fixed, it was at anywhere from $1.15 to $1.25 based on gallons per minute used or bought, in this case, from our perspective. And you got to understand that it was fixed for 20 years, so there wasn't a whole lot they could do to increase that. Would have required changes mandated by federal whatever legislation, and so it was very difficult for them to keep pace with the market of what it costs to produce water. That $1.15 to $1.25 rate per 1,000 gallons, well below the rate that was being charged for residents of Loudoun City, as well as well below rates in the general area. For example, the water that we buy from TAS was at about $2.78 per 1,000 gallons. So you could see contract was out of date. Wasn't only out of date from LUB's perspective, it was out of date for us as well. The contract, current contract that we're under is not a performance-based contract. It was basically, we'll buy X number of million gallons per year, and that was about it. That was the only requirement that we had in there. And no performance, meaning you need to give us the water in such a way that we won't have water pressure problems. LUB enhancements to help us with our problems was basically unavailable, and the reason why is that they weren't willing to go out there and fix a whole lot of things without a rate increase. So they couldn't cover their costs. So basically what they're saying is, we're giving you what's required under the contract, and that is so many million gallons of water per year. So needed to be a little more specific, and that's why we wanted to renegotiate this, is so that we could then begin to have better water on our end, and they would have the ability to make enhancements. We've been facing water pressure problems in the village for quite a while. We've been able to do things to boost the pressure, like using more water from TAS during certain hours, you know, adding a booster pump in the Skiatook area to take care of some problems up there. But, you know, those types of things that we could do under the current contract were kind of we were at the end of the rope, if you will, in that regard. And the reason why is because you can't boost water that's not there. So that's where we were. And so, but we had made plans going forward without renegotiating this contract, and that was for year 20 and 21, as you will know. It was in the budget for this year. We voted on it last year, was to build a 500,000 gallon tank up in the Coity area, but that at a cost of about $1.2 million. Added to that the cost of booster pumps throughout the village, another 600 or so thousand, got us up to you know, to remedy this problem. We needed an investment of about $1.8 or $1.9 million. And basically what that would have done if we'd have gone through that, just for future reference as I go through this presentation, that would have equated to about a $3.50 per month increase in our water bills. So keep that in mind later as I talk to you the result of this contract. Even with that investment of 1.89, there was no assurance that LUB could still give us the water that we needed to do when we needed it to be able to boost it. So we still needed LUB to make some improvements. And again, going back, their hands are tied more or less in making those improvements because of the fixed contract that we have. So with that, we have negotiated a new contract. I'll let Kevin talk to you and tell you from a legal perspective the more salient points of what's in that contract, and then I will jump in every once in a while for some commentary, but after he finishes, then I'll summarize it as to what this means to us.
Go on to the next slide, please. Good afternoon. Thank you, Bruce. Wanted to go through some of the key terms and conditions of the new contract. As you are well aware, having a stable long-term supply of water is essential to the future of the community and its growth. So we, through this negotiation process, wanted to set up a long-term contract arrangement with LUB as the primary supplier. And as we'll discuss in more detail, one of the most important points of this was to include performance metrics. That's it, requirements for LUB's service, so that they could easily be measured, and also there would be accountability relative to those requirements. So the contract that's been negotiated is roughly a 20-year term from commencing November 1 of this year through December 31 of 2040. The key is that through the contract provisions, LUB is going to supply sufficient water supply to meet our requirements, both of our current customers as well as in consideration of future growth in the village. And in order to make those determinations, we went through a very lengthy process with our consulting engineers to perform a water service study to determine the long-term supply needs of the village when accounted for future growth over the duration of this contract and beyond. In order to meet those needs, as Bruce had alluded to, LUB needed to implement some additional infrastructure improvements, and that's a key component of this contract agreement. They're going to be constructing a new 1 million gallon storage tank at Watts Cemetery Road. They're going to be making upgrades to their existing Von Orr Road pump station. They're going to be replacing a water main at Watts Cemetery Road. These improvements per the contractor to be completed by January 1, 2023, with a total estimated cost of the improvements to be at $2.25 million. Now, when we discuss rates, I'll note that the cost of those infrastructure improvements are going to be included or allocated into the rates going forward, because those improvements are specifically implemented for Teleco Village and the water service needs that we have. But it also, as Bruce stated, by LUB installing these infrastructure improvements, it eliminates the need for Tvpoa itself to build its own coyote storage tank, which previously had been budgeted at roughly $1.2 million. So there's certainly some offset there, and is an important cost savings that needs to be considered when looking at the future rates. I want to make a note relative to the infrastructure improvements before we talk about the rate. Our consulting engineers really evaluated these infrastructure improvements from a long-term standpoint, and they wanted to make sure that these infrastructure improvements would be sufficient to support our water needs through the duration of this long-term contract. So the expectation and anticipation is that additional infrastructure improvements will not be required during the course of this contract beyond what we're discussing here today. Go on to the next, please. As Bruce had mentioned, the current water rates under the existing contract were between $1.15 and $1.25 per 1,000 gallons. In order to determine the rates now and going forward, LUB undertook a very extensive cost of service study. And they looked at their cost of service across all customer groups and demographics. So it wasn't just specific to the POA as a volume customer. And LUB's objective in this process and in negotiating this contract and all other contracts they have in place was for all customer groups to essentially pay the same pro rata proportion of their cost of service. So that everyone across the board in all customer service groups are, while not paying the same dollar for dollar, they're paying the same percentage of the actual cost to deliver service to that customer group. So with respect to the rate structure, commencing January 1, 2021, the rate is going to be at $1.94 per 1,000 gallons. The next step in the rate will be upon LUB's commencement of all the infrastructure improvements, and that'll be once they have contractors in place and issue a notice to proceed for construction of the particular improvements referenced before. At that point, the rate will go to $2.12 per 1,000 gallons. The third step in this process will be upon LUB's completion of the infrastructure improvements. Once we get verified completion, the rate will be $2.30 per 1,000 gallons. Now, what this rate constitutes is it will be at what's called 85% cost recovery, which is LUB's objective across all pricing categories, that all customers would pay approximately 85% cost recovery. In addition to that actual cost recovery, the $2.30 rate includes the costs allocated towards the infrastructure improvements that were particular to Teleco Village. Thereafter, commencing on January 2024, and at least every 5 years thereafter for the duration of the contract, the rate will be set based upon future cost of service studies. Now, it's important that we already have a cost of service study as a baseline, and that cost of service study already accounts and allocates for the infrastructure improvements that are going to be included. So given that there is not an expectation of any major infrastructure improvements over the next 20 years, we don't expect there to be major cost increases over the next 20 years, aside from general cost of service and allocation for inflation and other general cost increases across the board. But we don't expect any major bumps in service cost for infrastructure improvements. I think Bruce got a comment.
I do, and that's at the bottom. People have asked, what's the impact of these increases? Well, as Rick put out in his message to the community, basically the $1.94 per thousand that takes effect this January, what it really means is approximately a $5 increase per the average POA water bill. Now, I've had some people come back and say, wait a second, $1.94 versus $1.25 or $1.20, that's about a 55% increase. I got a water bill that's $160 a month and you're only going up 5. That's only 4%, so how do you get that? So just to let people know that the water bill that you see at home includes a lot more factors than just the wholesale water. The wholesale water is a small component of that total water bill. You've got maintenance, you've got personnel costs, you've got lost water costs, you've got costs going into reserves, et cetera. And when you add up all of those and you add to that the cost of wholesale water, then you get the water bill. And the reason why that percentage is not the same is because it's just a subset or a portion of the total cost that goes into your water bill. So just let you know. But the average water bill that we have looked at will be somewhere between $4 and $6, so about an average of $5 per water bill.
And with respect to the rates themselves, we think even with the cost increases due to the enhancement of infrastructure, we think they're still very competitive within the region and vicinity. In fact, they are still less than what we've been paying to TAS for supplemental water service, and less than certain other utility rates in the region. So I think they're reasonable and competitive. Now, moving on to the next component, and from our perspective, probably one of the most important components of this whole negotiation is to have measurable performance standards. Previously, those were not in our agreement with LUB. We just purchased water from them in the amounts that they could supply, and we would pay for it. And there wasn't a measurable performance standard that was included. And so that's why this is such a key component of the new contract. There are performance standards that are based on verifiable data. The data can be updated as frequently as every 15 to 30 minutes relative to the available flow of water. So it's going to be something that we can measure, we can verify, and we can hold LUB accountable for their service performance. Essentially, LUB will be obligated to supply water on demand of up to 3.2 million gallons per day. Now, the reason it says on demand is we don't require that volume of water on a regular basis. Really, where we were experiencing shortfalls were during hours of peak demand, typically for irrigation early in the morning. So, but what this provides is they will always have available on demand sufficient water to meet our needs even during peak hours of usage. And it's, aside from the total water supply, we've even gotten more granular with the requirements in that there's specific gallons per minute to be supplied at each of the 4 master meters that are subject to the service. And you can see those: 2,000 gallons a minute at Maple Hill, 650 gallons a minute at Little Valley, 120 gallons a minute at Poplar Ridge, and 400 gallons at Ritchie Road. And again, all these numbers have been backed up by our engineers. They've been reviewed by LUB's engineers, and we think these are conservative factors that will allow for future growth on our end. And with respect to LUB, these are numbers that they're confident that they can meet. The next. As I mentioned, accountability. There is a financial component of this, and if LUB doesn't deliver the required water flow at any of the meters on at least 3 occasions in duration of 60 minutes or longer during any 7-day period, the POA's water rate will be reduced by 15 cents per 1,000 gallons. And that 15 cents per 1,000 gallons is equal to the rate increase attributable to the infrastructure improvements. So, and that rate reduction will be for the entirety of the month if LUB fails to meet, again, the standards on at least 3 occasions during any given 7-day period. So if, for example, in October, or there were three failures during a given 7-day period, the entire bill for the month of October would be reduced by 15 cents per 1,000 gallons. So there's obviously financial incentive for LUB to perform. Another important component is LUB is going to continue to provide water storage that's required for compliance with TDEC water reserve regulations. TDEC requires a 24-hour storage requirement. That is, you must have storage of the volume of water that's typically used within any 24-hour period. So LUB will continue to be providing that so that we'll maintain compliance with TDEC standards. I'll let Bruce kind of jump in at this point. Those are really the key terms and conditions of the contract, again, that we've negotiated over the course of a number of years and with assistance from all of our engineers and consultants. And I'll let Bruce kind of have the last word here.
Okay, thanks. Going back to the very first slide, you recall that we had plans to put in booster pumps, et cetera, and to make sure that Pat could fill up his coffee pot in less than 3 hours, and other people could flush their commodes on demand, and those kinds of things. So without us having to do workarounds, if you will. So now we're to the point where LUB can provide us the water that we need. And so in that regard, with that supply of water, the volume coming when we need it and on demand, if we put in a series of booster pumps associated with that, then basically even during the peak hours, we would be able to get the water pressures that the people in the village want. Now, when I say booster pumps, our engineers from Jacobs Engineering, Adam and crew, have looked at this, and they have concluded that with the water and with the performance standards that LUB will meet, then we will need to put in a booster pump in 2021, and that would be, I believe, at probably the Maple Hill meter, and then we'll put in another one in 2022, and that will be at the Little Valley meter. With those two meters, those two booster pumps going in at about $300,000 a piece, spread over 2 years, then we'll be to the point where we'll provide more than adequate service even during peak hours. We may have to add additional booster pumps way in the out years to be determined after we go through this and see how many more people move into the village, and if we expand the village or whatever, all these things that go into it. But right now, we feel like these booster pumps will serve us through build-out, and that we'll be able to allow people to freely use the water during irrigation periods, filling up swimming pools, you name it. So that's where we are. And so with that, before I call for a vote on it, I would like to ask Ty if he has any comments that he might like to make. I don't know if that mic's on, Ty.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I do go where I'm invited, and thank you for the invitation. I do go where I'm invited, and my name is Ty Ross. I'm the general manager of Loudoun Utilities. It's important for this body to know that the governing body of Loudoun Utilities, the LUB board, has already considered and approved this contract. So essentially, we've already weighed in on it, and we await your approval on your side. I think a lot of context and explanation has been provided today. I'm merely here to be supportive and to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, Bruce, with that, I'm going to call for a motion to approve the water services agreement between Loudoun Utilities Board and the Teleco Village Property Owners Association. Pat moves. Do I have a second? Second. Marty's the second. I'll now open it for discussion. Steve?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Barely.
Yes, yes.
Hello.
Are we ready to go, Beth? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. Seeing how this is a POA contract, I haven't heard anything from Winston. Winston, I'd like to have your thoughts on this contract and if you recommend the board approve it, because you have to run this place, and as I said, this is your contract, not a board contract.
Technically, I have to sign it.
Yes, Steve, it's, as Bruce has mentioned, I'm sure Ty will agree, it's been a long process. We both have given quite a bit, worked quite a bit. We have worked the engineers very hard, we've worked the attorney, on both sides to get the language the way we wanted. And then we went back and started over several times. And, but all the comments that you've heard from Bruce, Kevin, Ty, and maybe others are, I agree with. I think our old contract had ran its course. It was time to prepare for the next 20 years, and now I'm in agreement with this contract, Steve.
Bruce,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Bruce, I don't know if this question is for you, but
Okay.
just for my own edification, you know, you talk about the 2 booster pumps that we need to install. Can you just explain quickly why those are needed and why that alleviates the need for a storage tank?
Sure. Booster pumps are needed because, and specifically in this village, is because we can't depend on gravity to get the water up the hills and down the hills that we have. Kind of like you remember the other day when we had about sewage. Sewage, you have to pump that stuff all over the place. Well, you have to pump the water too. Start out with a tank and it comes down. If we didn't have booster pumps, it runs up a hill toward his house, and then it doesn't go. It doesn't have the pressure to come out his spigot at the rate that is satisfactory, if you will. So what you do is you put a inline pump that just push it on up the hill, if you will. And so that's what we've done, is that we asked our engineers to take the elevation where the tank is and monitor it flowing into the village, and then where would we need and how many of these pumps would we need to put in our system to push it on up the hills that we have. And because you can't depend on sheer elevation and the pressure of gravity. So that's basically why we need those. They have determined through their modeling that we will need 2 now, meaning this year and next year. And the reason I say this year and next year is they got to build that 1 million gallon tank, and they got to put in those other improvements to get the water to us. Okay, now there's some incentives built into the contract that says starting on January 1st, and you may have heard it, the wording is that when you start the contracts, we will give you this new rate. Not until then. We're not going beyond that until you start your contract. So if they start it, then we'll increase to the next level. When they finish it, they will get their 3rd increase of this total amount. And again, they're incentivized to do that. Right now, they're estimating, I believe, Ty, that they'll be through by September of 22. If they get through in June of 22 and it's satisfactory, meaning we get the performance that we want, then the rate will go up then. If they don't finish it before, we'll wait until they finish it before it goes up that 3rd rate.
So there is adequate supply from LUB for a booster pump to be effective even today.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Just for your further edification, I can't speak to the hydrology of their system. We view it from the other side of the fence. And I think the best way to explain it you and to the audience watching is to look at your utility bills. When you receive your electric bill from LUB, it's a layered cost. You have the cost of TVA producing that electricity, and then a layered cost on top of that of LUB distributing it. Your water bill is similar but different, and the way it differs is LUB is producing your water, and there's layers on top of your bill where Tvpoa has its cost of distribution on top of it. But the math we did on our side was at the request of your engineers, Jacobs Engineering, on how much water you need for your system to operate at its determined optimal level over the course of this contract. And that's what we responded to.
I would say that our rates would have really been higher if we had insisted, and we went through this as one of the iterations, it would have been a whole lot more if we had insisted that LUB give us the water at such a way that we wouldn't have to have booster pumps. It would have been very high. And so we went through that iteration and concluded that LUB didn't want to go there or couldn't go there. So that's where we are. But you asked if we could satisfy our requirements with booster pumps with the water they're giving us now. No, because they only have a 300,000 gallon tank that feeds us right now. But when they went to 1 million, they got 1 million plus 3, so they got 1.3 million gallons of water that they can give us, okay? And that will guarantee us the volume coming through the meters that we need that we could then boost to get up our hills.
Okay. So it is dependent on on supply we do not have today yet.
That's correct.
That's correct.
Absolutely. That's what those infrastructure improvements are needed to get the supply level that's going to be required long-term.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Other questions or comments? Okay, since there are no
Do we
other.
have any from outside?
Nothing from outside? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion? It passes 7-0. Thank you, Ty.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much.
You too.
Oh, you can't go now. You gotta stay for the rest of the day. Okay, that's okay then.
Get out of here now.
Okay, that brings us to the other part of the agenda. And there are some items already there. There are two capital expenditure proposals for the board to consider.
Okay, we do have two capital project funding requests for your consideration today. First of those being a new grapple truck for Public Works. This is unbudgeted for this year. I've already earlier today given you a little bit of the history of how this has rolled its way forward in the budget. Started out in 2023. It was pulled forward initially into this year's budget for 2021, and now it is coming to you in 2020 as more of a sense of urgency than we thought we would have initially. Both of the existing trucks are out of service, and the cost to repair those will be not only expensive but time consuming. Some of the parts will require fabrication in machine shops, and not the sort of thing you can just go pick up at AutoZone and be on your way. In the meantime, we're using more labor and we're using equipment that is ill-suited to the task, meaning that we're operating in an uneconomical manner at present. Like I say, this project was not budgeted for this year, but the request is for $161,167. If this project is approved for funding this year, right now or shortly, then we'll reduce the 21 budget by $170,000. That was the estimate that was in the budget, and we talked about that a little bit earlier this morning. There were a number of bids solicited. There were 4 bidders that submitted quotes on this equipment. At one time, we thought that Public Works was going to recommend that first bid, CMI Equipment Sales, and they're in Goodlettsville, Tennessee, just north of Nashville. But late in the day, and actually was Monday, I think, of this week, we received a 4th bid from Public Works Equipment in Monroe, North Carolina. Public Works guys looked not only at the bid, but at the piece of equipment that they were quoting, and determined that we could get a bigger, higher quality truck, more capability for less money. So that is the recommended bid at $161,167. Funding would be from unrestricted operating cash, and there is some detail attached in your packets that shows some of the bids submitted. Project has been approved through Mr. Blazer, but because this exceeds the $50,000 limit for his approval authority, it does come to the board. The request would be that you entertain a motion to approve $161,167 capital project with funding from unrestricted operating cash for purchase of a new grapple truck for Public Works brush pickup.
So I need a motion to approve the unbudgeted expenditure of $161,167 from unrestricted operating cash to purchase a new grapple truck to replace the current equipment.
So moved.
Marty moves, Pat seconds. Discussion. Bruce.
I have to say that the PSAC has some concerns over this. I was contacted by the chairman of the PSAC yesterday. I think they were caught unawares when they had their PSAC meeting that this was coming forward, even though it had been before the board previously, and we discussed it when we had the Public Works update. They had some questions as to why we can't repair what we have. Because I guess that didn't go back through the PSAC, they were unaware of what all Public Works had done in an attempt to get these two trucks back on the road, and that and they want to know why we couldn't just buy a grapple instead of the whole thing. 2 things here. Number one is they've gone out and they've found grapples, but nobody wants to install those on the trucks that we have, because of the fact that they've had to do quite a bit of welding and so forth to the truck. So those aren't stock trucks. So they're not quite willing to put those grapples on our trucks. Second thing is that for them to repair the current grapples that we have, found that they have to go out and get somebody to fabricate the parts. They're just not in stock. And I have been working with my brother, who is a wholesaler of heavy-duty equipment. I've asked him questions just to get answers, and he basically said that, yeah, you can find grapples, in trucks, but bottom line is that if you don't know the brand name of the grapple, and I've asked Jeff and them, what's the brand of the grapple that we have, and it has no name on it. So it's kind of hard to find parts and things for grapples that you don't know. The other question and comment from the PSAC was that these 2 trucks that we bought, we kind of that wasn't a good deal for us. Well, 20/20 hindsight turns out, because of the fact that they're down now after 2 years and they're not working, you could probably say that, but we purchased those, as I recall, at a combined cost of like $40,000 because the company went out of business. The intent there is, if we couldn't find something to repair these grapples, and we haven't been able to yet, is to repurpose those trucks for other things because they hold, a lot of stuff. They got big beds. So it's not as if we're throwing everything away. It's just the grapples are the problem, not the trucks. So we'll repurpose those. So I just think that the biggest thing there is, and lesson learned here is, even though it had been through the board and the board was quite familiar with it, I think PSAC was caught off guard, and I think hopefully we've caught them back up now. But
I'll point out, in support of that, Bruce, at the very end of your packet, I went back and found the funding request from 2017, when we bought the other two, the current two grapple trucks, some $45,000 for the two trucks combined. So we've gotten 3 years service out of them, and whether that's a good deal or a bad deal, we had at that time $160,000 in the 2018 budget to buy new grapple trucks, and so we avoided that cost by buying the two used ones. Got 3 years service, and we'll, with some work, we'll kind of do piecing and parts together to get one good truck out of the two current trucks. It's my understanding.
Well, I have asked Jeff to continue working to see if you can find a grapple to go on one of those, so we have two in service. And I think they'll continue to do that, but they've been striking out so far.
Mr. President?
Is that Jeff?
Yes.
I would like to say that after we found the lower
I'm
bid
sorry,
from Public
who's
Works-
on the line here?
Jeff.
Oh, Jeff, I'm sorry. I can barely hear you, Jeff.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me better now?
Somebody needs to turn the volume up in there. Turn the volume up.
Is that any better?
That's a little better.
Okay. I would like to say that after we found the lower bid from the Public Works equipment out of Monroe, North Carolina, that we went back to the public service, and although we didn't get all 7 of them voting, we got 4 replies that they are good with the project or the equipment that we're wanting to buy with the 161. The other 3 just did not respond at all to us. I don't know if they hadn't seen it or chose not to respond, but we did get a unanimous, or not.
Okay. Other comments, questions? Okay, I'm going to put it to a vote. All in favor? It passes 7-0.
Okay, thank you.
Grapple away.
Yeah.
Okay, next project, and this is the last for the day, is to purchase a UVC air purification system for the Wellness Center. This is not budgeted for this year. The request is for $12,623, proposed to be funded from the Safety Reserve Fund. This UVC air purification system at the Wellness Center would be intended to help prevent the spread of not only COVID-19, but also the flu and other airborne viruses and bacteria. The Wellness Center arguably is one of our most vulnerable buildings for a vulnerable population, given that its intended use and its actual use is for exercise, which involves physical exertion, heavy breathing, and lots of air intake. The technology for this UVC system is well established, but there's been a renewed interest in it, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's used in hospitals, surgery centers, food processing facilities, office buildings, private homes. We would like to try this out at the Wellness Center. If it proves successful there, and we'll monitor it and see the effectiveness of installing this system at the Wellness Center, then we may come back and ask that it be expanded to include other Tvpoa buildings that property owners have occasion to frequent. Not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I did ask Jeff this morning, and he came back with an email or text to me that for the other buildings on our campus that are accessible to property owners, and this would be things like the yacht club, the clubhouses, Chota, et cetera, welcome center and so forth, admin building, would take about $85,000 to do the rest of the campus. The recommendation of the contractor is Interstate Mechanical Service. They're the contractor that has the contract for providing all maintenance services for our HVAC systems. They changed the filters in all of our HVAC systems, and they would include inspection and servicing of these units as part of their regular monthly rounds. There might be a slight additional cost, but we expect that would be minimal. I don't have a dollar amount, but they're there anyway servicing the units, and so adding on inspection and servicing of the UVC system is it was not that time consuming on their behalf and shouldn't amount to much additional cost. Recommending that funding be from the safety reserve, we've got a balance almost $79,000 in there. There are no pending uses for those funds. A little bit of background on that. That safety reserve fund is sort of a carryover from the days where we provided capital funding for Teleco Village Volunteer Fire Department, in addition to the contract price that we pay them for, for providing that fire protection service. We renegotiated that contract 2 or 3 years ago, and so we're no longer providing capital support to TVVFD. We've not added funds to the safety reserve of late, but on the other hand, we've not had any demands on that fund. So it seems to me appropriate that as a safety-related measure, health-related measure for our wellness center building, that be an appropriate place to look for funding. So the request for board consideration. Oh, and one other thing. If you look back in your package, I hope you took the time to read. There's a write-up. It's a few pages long, but I thought it was really well done, describing UVC technology, how it's used, how it works, what it does, and why it is deemed to be effective for most of these type uses. So the request to the board for board consideration would be approval of $12,623 as a capital project for a UVC air purification system for the Wellness Center with funding from the Safety Reserve Fund.
Okay, I need a motion to approve the unbudgeted expenditure of $12,623 from the Safety Reserve Fund for the purchase of UVC air purification systems for the HVAC units at the Wellness Center to assist with airborne virus and bacteria mitigation. Do I have a motion? Bruce. Second. Second. Discussion.
Yeah, I have a question, and I just perused this because we just got this morning. We've been kind of busy, but for those that have read it, if you'll help me out here, how do we know the system's working?
I got one in my furnace, in my units at home, and they work great.
Okay, so then this is my question. I go out and I buy.
It's an old technology.
Yeah, I know. I go out and I buy 2 deer whistles and I put them on my front of a car. As long as I don't hit a deer, the deer whistle works. But as soon as I hit a deer, I realized they didn't work all along, but I bought them. So how do I know it works?
Pat, I don't know about your deer problem, but I asked that same question. I asked for references.
Yeah.
And they're used at surgery centers. I can't remember the name of the surgery centers. That's something about orthopedic group. They're used at UT Vet Hospital and their surgery centers. And they named off some pretty high-profile places where germs could have a serious impact on their business. And because that was my question. My second is how long did they last?
2 years.
And they're 2 years of use, depending on, it depends on how long you leave the bulb on, but then you change the bulb.
I saw in there that it was also variable, so during COVID-19, you turn it way up, and then after it's over, you can turn it down.
Yeah,
and so I got that, but my question was just, how do I know? I didn't see that part in there.
Well, I don't think that it's an absolute cure, because if somebody walks in and it's a direct contact to somebody else, if they have the germ, they're gonna get the flu or what have you. But if it goes through this system, I think it's relatively high that it will kill the germ.
It's also used on evaporator coils for mold control.
Sure. And then I'm noticing it's out of the safety. We've got adequate funds in the safety. We have no planned uses for that. And in the wellness center, in my opinion, this would be a good place to start, because you do have a lot of traffic, a lot of heavy breathing. You're subjecting the patrons of that wellness center to exactly why they should be wearing masks or not, you know. So to me, it's a fit, but that was the only question I had.
Okay. Other questions or comments?
President.
Hang on, I'll get to you. Any other questions or comments from the board? Ken?
I can hear you.
So it's a test, and how long is that test going to go on? And I'm not sure the criteria for saying it's successful or not. I didn't hear that. What is the criteria?
At least until the bulbs go out.
Pardon?
He's saying the test goes at least till the bulbs go out, and then from my perspective.
What? The bulbs go out, it's what you said, it's
2 years.
Wait a minute.
2 years.
We're going to wait 2 years before we say that the test is successful?
Well, how are you gonna know? It's like wearing a mask. How you gonna
Mr.
know?
President.
So no, typically, Ken, you could say I flip a switch day one, nobody got sick, success.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying is, we said we're going to do a test, and if the test works, then we'll implement it in other places. Now we're saying it's going to be 2 years until the bulb burns out, then that's going to be the test, and the only way we know it worked or didn't work is nobody got sick? That's the test protocol?
No, I don't.
Do you know of a test for airborne particles?
I do not.
Okay.
I'm not an expert in that
I would
category.
recommend, Rick, that you just give it to staff to find out if, there's a way to test. I don't know of one before and after. And
He's got a valid point. My point would be, let's put it where it's, as Pat pointed out, most logical to put it, where you would have the highest rate of.
Well, I think you have to have a way of measuring something in the air output from the before and after to say
You
it's
would have
successful.
to have some kind of a baseline of what's in the air now, and then
Yes.
compare it afterwards. I know, coming from a pharmaceutical background, in clean rooms, you have those things, but this is not a clean room environment.
I think at this point in time, because of the fact that you got all of these people that are staying away from the wellness center because of their fear. If you can add one more thing to dispel the fears in a place like that, you're ahead of the game if you can do that, and very inexpensively.
Well,
And
it
if
might
it's-
make people
and
more
if-
comfortable coming back.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
Jeff.
Okay.
Can you hear me, Mr. President?
Jeff?
Can't hear it. They
turn
need
it
to
up.
turn him up in there.
We have built into this project testing that has to be pulled by interstate and taken to a lab to be able to verify the pathogens are killed, but that is part of their process.
And Jeff, any idea how long that'll take?
I assume 30 days. I didn't ask them a specific timeline, but I
So-
will get back
so
to them.
Jeff,
and ask them. They didn't.
Are they going to baseline test the air before they put it in?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so my question goes, if 30 days after they install it, 30 days, it comes back and it shows a market improvement or what it's supposed to be doing, I think at that point, it would be a good idea to look at all the other facilities right away for this winter and not wait. That's a comment I'd like to make.
Okay, got it. Any other comments? Anything from outside? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor? The vote is 7-0 to approve.
Thank you.
And
you.
Winston, we did ask staff to come, to let us know if there's any way of testing air quality and to know if there's any way to tell the effectiveness of that unit.
Yeah, I think I'll just follow up on what Jeff said and have him give a report.
Perfect, thank you.
I don't know anything about measuring air quality, but the before and then after. And then I guess we need to follow up with budget numbers to get this in for 21, unless we just want to move in November, December.
Well, if we're going to know within 30 days whether this is going to achieve the results that we're looking for, why would we wait?
Right, exactly.
So I would suggest if the tests indicate that, yes, it works, I'd do it this year.
See, my whole question is.
And by the way, that makes everybody just a little bit more comfortable with their environment.
Well, I think we need it in the places where people feel uncomfortable, because our record is pretty good right now. We haven't had a single COVID case. We have one that was misreported, but not a case.
You may, yeah,
Yeah, he
you
just
may
jinxed
assume that, but we don't know.
Yeah, and he just,
Well,
he
I'm gonna
just
tell you
jinxed
one
us
thing.
forever.
I know enough about the COVID to know
I
that if
said,
you
like,
had
Marty,
it
you're
and
gonna
people were
make
running
that
around in there, more people gonna get it.
Yeah, I got it.
And then we make double bogeys.
So, is there anything else for other? No. Okay, with that, move to adjourn?
There's nobody out there with another?
No, we checked.
So we just went through,
We're done.
seriously, we just went, and we may still be on, we went through Tugaloo and a water rate increase, and there's no other?
Nope.
See ya.
Yeah, the last comment was Norris's about
Norris was the only one.